Hey guys, so let's say you're watching this right now, and let's say you're struggling, right? You're struggling with a specific sin, right? Let's say you're struggling with a sin that, it sort of robs you of your happiness, right? And you even know deep down this is not a sin or something that you're proud of doing, right? Like this is not something that, you're proud of. Yeah, like every day, you're very anxious. Every day you're very just in a bad mood, like you're very saddened, you're down, right? And this is exactly what sins does, right? Like sins, it puts you down, like it puts you in a very sad, depressive state, right? Like you feel like, yeah, like you feel just very like sad, like very down, like you have um no spirit, right? Like no sense of spirit, right? And so, and yeah, and you struggle with this, right? Like this is a sin that you're not very proud of, but it always tends to, bring you back, right? Like every time you find yourself going back to it, and it's like, sometimes you even beat yourself up for it, right? Like you're like, yo, like why am I doing this? I shouldn't be doing this. Like, my family wouldn't be proud, I'm not proud, God wouldn't be proud, right? And so, yeah, I just want to kind of, help you in that sense. To in the sense that, hopefully, I mean, I'm not I'm not sitting here to tell you that, I'm this perfect sinless person, right? Because reality is that's not the case, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you like I'm perfect and I don't ever sin, because there's sins that I could be doing, right? That, you know yeah, like in our eyes it might be a little sin, or it could, but at the end of the day it's still a sin, right? Like you could be talking back to your mom, you could be raising your voice at your mom, right? And these things are a sin, right? Even though to us, we might view, major sins as sins, right? We might view like, adultery, fornication, zina, um you know alcohol, like we might view these things as sin, right? But every literally a lot of things are sins, right? Like you cursing is a sin, right? So it's like, you know we're not perfect, right? That's one thing we also have to understand, is the fact that, you know yeah, we're not perfect, right? God hasn't brought us onto this earth to be perfect, right? And so sometimes, we also have to go easy on ourselves, right? Sometimes we also have to, you know, yeah, like as much as, we want to give up sins, right? Like we should want to give up sins, right? Like we should always want to work hard, to give up a sin, ask for forgiveness, and try to give it up, right? But, there are sins out there, right, that we could just fall into, right? And so sometimes we also got to be very easy with ourselves, right? Like we have to understand that, um yeah, we're not angels, and God doesn't expect us to be angels, right? But there's also, like I said, the side of, you trying to change it, right? You trying to fix your ways, right? Like it's not enough to just, sit back and say, we're not perfect, so, that's a justification for me to keep sinning. No, right? Like you can't justify your sins, right? But, you should also, when, especially if you're in a time of despair, right? You're in a time of, you know you're almost like, yeah, you're despairing from God's mercy, right? Like now you have to remind yourself, right, that we're not perfect, and God doesn't expect us to be perfect, right? All he wants us to do is just to, repent for our sins, and try to fix our ways, right? Try to do whatever you can to change it, right? And so this is what I wanted to help you guys on, right? I wanted to sort of give you guys tips, right, on ways to, you know prevent, or I should say ways to, you know to prevent yourself from falling into a sin, right? um because there are things out there that we can do, right? Like steps and actions that we can do so that we don't fall into a sin, right? Like take for example alcohol, right? Or let's say for example zina, right? Since these are common, right? Zina, alcohol, smoking, drugs, and these things, right? If these things always come as a result of something, right? Sometimes you could be just at home chilling, right? When you're at home, let's say there's no alcohol, there's nothing, right? But let's say the weekend comes around, right? And let's say your buddy calls you like, yo, what's up, man? We should hang out, right? And that moment that you go and hang out with that person, that's the moment that you find yourself sinning, right? Like that's the moment that you find yourself falling into a sin, right? And so now it's like, if you can highlight, right, when is it that you sin and when is it that those desires come up, right? Is it when your friend calls you, right? And or you're hanging out with your friend, and that's when you find yourself after that sinning, right? And so now it's like, once you can pinpoint when it is that you fall into a sin, or when it is that you get these desires, now it's like you can try to change that, right? So for example, right, like let's say you're in certain environments, right? Like I said, you're in environments where there's alcohol around. You're in environments where there's women around, right? You're in environments where these things are around. Most likely you're gonna feel a desire, right? Sometimes it could even come from your friends, right? Like the people around you can be like, yo man, just or they might even pour a drink for you and might be like, here man, just take a sip, right? And so, or sometimes they don't even have to tell you. Like sometimes you'll feel compelled to drink, right? Like because like everybody around you is drinking and you're the only sober one, right? And so and that's when, right, sins usually happen, right? Let's say for example in your case, when you're around certain people in certain environments, right? And so now if you can try to change that, right? Try to change that environment that you're always in, right? Like sometimes, let's say, your friend calls you and he's like, yo man, let's hang out. Maybe instead of him giving you, maybe instead of him telling you like, hey, come to my house, maybe you should tell him, yo man, let's go here, right? Like give him, maybe you should be the one to initiate, right? Or help direct your friend, right? Or tell him, we should go, like let's go here, like somewhere that's like there's not a lot of temptations, right? There's not a lot of like is an environment that is very nourishing, right? Is an environment that is very healthy. You're probably not gonna fall into a sin when you're in this environment, right? So like I said, maybe initiate to your friend, right? Like tell him, yeah, let's go here instead, right? Or if it gets to a level where let's say your friends, sometimes they might have more control, right? They might have more, let's say, a sense of, yeah, like control. Then in that case, you might have to reach a point where you might have to change your friends, right? Or just whenever the weekend comes around, maybe tell your friend, hey, yeah, tell your friends, I have a change of schedule. From here on out, I can't go out on the weekends, right? I have a change of schedule. Like you don't even have to tell them. Like if you're afraid of, because I know some people might be like, oh, I don't know if I can tell my friend this, right? Like if you're afraid of telling directly to your friends, maybe, yeah, like I said, maybe give it to them in a different way, right? And so yeah, that's all it's about. It's all about just trying your best to to do what you can, right, to make sure that you don't fall into sin, right? Because at the end of the day, like I said, right, there's sins that we would commit just off of human nature, but there's also sins that we don't necessarily have to fall into, right? Like right now, I could choose whether I want to drink alcohol or not, right? Like, yeah, I could choose to, right? But it's like, you know, and also like, what there's things that would help me as well, right? To not be able to drink it, right? By staying away from certain people, staying away from certain environments, right? Now, yeah, it would help me to not drink alcohol, right? And this goes for, every other every other sin out there, right? It could be anything, anything. Zina, right? And same thing with that, right? It's just changing your environment, right? Not being in environments where the opposite gender is around, right? I mean, sometimes some things are unavoidable, right? Like, let's say, for example, you go to the mall, like you can't avoid seeing the opposite gender, right? But at the same time, at least the mall is not a place where, you would commit zina right there, right? Whereas, like, let's say if you're at a house party, or like you're at a place where, the clubs or something, zina is gonna come from that, right? Whereas if you're at a mall, most likely, you don't really know the people there. So it's like, most likely nothing is really gonna come out of that, right? So yeah, like I said, it's just about changing your environment, right? And trying to, do what you can, to prevent certain things, right? Um, you know, like, and yeah, I would also say, another tip would be filling your time up with things that keep you busy, right? That keep you looking forward to it. Like, let's say, for example, hanging out with your family, right? Like, that's something that I would say everybody enjoys, right? Like, I mean, unless maybe your family is not, like, maybe if it's a toxic environment, that's a different thing. But generally speaking, right? Everybody enjoys being around family, right? Like, everybody enjoys being around their parents, their siblings, right? And yeah, if you can spend 2 hours, 3 hours talking to your family, right? Like, this keeps your mind occupied, right? You're not really thinking about sinning, right? You're not thinking about, you're not really thinking about, doing something else, right? Because you're in the company of your family, right? Let's say, for example, right? You exercise, right? Like, and that's another a tip too, right? Like, sometimes when you exercise, like, let's say for those people that struggle with zina, right? Fornication and these things, right? Exercise, I found it to be something that, it like, for example, let's say you have a lot of testosterone, or you have a lot of energy, right? And let's say this turns into like a desire, right? Like, you want to use up this energy, right? Now, when you start to exercise, that energy that you have, right, you're using it in exercising, right? Like, that energy that you have, let's say testosterone or whatever it is, you're using exercising as a form of, getting rid of that energy, right? Like, and you're also at the same time working your body too, right? Like, you're building your health, right? Like, you're building your muscles and your body, right? So, and at the same time, you're lowering, I guess, you're reducing your energy, right? By working out. When you sweat and you're lifting weights, afterwards, you feel drained, right? Like, you feel like, I have no energy to do anything else. I have no energy to commit zina, right? And yeah, so that's one tip I would give to those who struggle with committing zina or these things, right? Like I said, change your environment. Be around environments that keep your mind busy, right? Like your family, right? Work out more, right? Like, even in your room, even in your house, work out. You know, you can go in your room, do push-ups, sit-ups, you know, and that reduces your energy, right? So afterwards you're not gonna have energy for anything else, right? What else? I'm trying to think of more tips that would help you guys. You know, and yeah, this is just for, you know, any other sin, right? You know, it's just about, like I said, you know, knowing when these sins come up, when you start to desire these things, right? And pinpointing when that exactly is, and trying to now come up with actions, right, to change that. You know, and yeah, this goes for any other sin, right? Like I said, zina, you know, adultery, right? May Allah protect us from, you know, from these sins. And you know, one thing about committing sins, right? Like, one thing that also kind of helps me to avoid certain things is the idea of, you know, when you sin, like, let's say you sin, right? Afterwards there's gonna be punishments, right? And I mean punishments in the sense that, you know, there's gonna be an effect afterwards, right? Like, let's say for example, alcohol, right? When you drink alcohol, you know, afterwards, you know, let's say the day after, you get headaches, right? You start, you don't feel too good, right? Like, you don't feel too good the day after, right? Like, that's a form of punishment, right? Like, it's like the alcohol is, you could say, is rewarding, but there's a punishment after, right? And so, you know, these punishments is what can help you to abstain from it, right? Like, let's say for example, when you're about to commit zina, right? And you know in the back of your mind, you know, if I commit this zina, you know, if I commit this zina, then, you know, there's a chance that the person can get pregnant, right? There's a chance that the person has STDs, right? Like, who's to say that, you know, the person that you're sleeping with hasn't slept with someone else, right? And so now it's like, you know, there's infections that's being passed around, right? You know, I know some people say, oh, you know, nowadays there's contraception, you can use, you know, protection and on all these things, right? But, you know, protections are not 100%, right? Like, right now as a man, like, you could use, you know, a contraception, and then it breaks. Now what, right? Like, you thought going into it that this contraception would have helped you, but then you realize afterwards that you know, it wasn't 100% secure, right? So, you know, and then from that, you know, if it breaks, now the STDs or the HIV that you were trying to avoid, you ended up catching it, right? Because the contraception broke, right? And so, you know, and these are like punishments, right? Like, these are things that, you know, come from sinning, right? That comes from, you know, going against what God has commanded, right? Whereas if you're married, you know, you don't have to use contraception, right? Like, you don't have to worry whether your spouse has a disease or not, right? Because now you're married, right? You know, whereas if you're just going around and you're sleeping around with just random people, right? And you can even know the person, right? Some people say, oh, I know this person, I know so much about them, you know, but it's like, you don't really know someone, right? Like, you don't know, you only know what they tell you, right? Like, you can only know so much. Like, you don't know who that person was with before you, right? Like, they're not gonna tell you that. They're not gonna tell you, hey, you know, before this, you know, I made a mistake, you know, I slept with this this person, right? They're not gonna tell you that. And so, you know, and like I said, you know, there's that punishment, right, that comes after. And so you having that in the back of your mind, right, like that helps you to avoid it, right? Because if you know, you know, if I commit this sin, there's a punishment after, you know, the likelihood is higher, I'm gonna avoid it, right? I'm not gonna go to it, because I know, like, you know, I can catch a deadly disease that can end my life, right? And now I'm not, you know, is a big loss, right? It's like a big thing, you know, a big loss that you're gonna take. You know, if you catch HIV, for example, you're not gonna, you know, yeah, it could damage your immune system, and over time it's gonna lead to death, right? So, and then imagine you have kids, right? Or you're gonna have kids, you know, you're gonna have a spouse, you're gonna have a family. And imagine now, right? Like you're in your marriage or you're with your family, and then later on you just passed away, right? And now your kids have nothing, you know, nobody to take care of them, all because of you making a foolish mistake, right? And so, yeah, and then like I said, these are things that, you know, would help you to abstain from these sins, right? You know, and like I said, this goes for every other sin, right? Pornography, for example. You know, if, like I said, if you know there's gonna be a punishment after, you're gonna try to avoid it, right? And for example, a lot of these sins also, it distances you from Allah, right? The thing that the thing that you need the most, right? You need Allah, right? To be able to even have the strength, right? To be able to even, you know, have the strength to stay away from sins, right? Like you need Allah, and sins are keeping you away from Allah, right? So it's like, now if you're away from Allah, where do you have the strength to be able to keep away from sins, right? Because ultimately it's Allah that can protect us, right? It's Allah that can give us the strength, right? You know, they say, Allah said, you know, prayer prohibits wrongdoing, right? Basically, in summary, is like, you know, prayer and being close to Allah, you know, it protects you from sins, right? It protects you from wrongdoing, right? You know, but if you don't have, if you're sinning against Allah and you don't have a connection with Allah, or you're losing that connection as you sin more, you know, where are you gonna find the strength, right? Where are you gonna find the strength to be able to give up these sins, right? And so, yeah, that's you know, that's a few things that everything that I'm sharing right now, right, is things that's helped me too, right? Because like I said, you know, if anything, I struggle with, you know, a lot of these sins, right? Like these are things that, you know, everybody everybody faces these temptations, right? Like nobody's immune to these sins, right? No one's immune to, you know, the opposite gender. No one's immune to these things, right? And so, you know, one thing for me though that helps me, right, is, you know, I do my best to, like I said, not being in certain environments, right? I avoid certain environments because I know myself, right? I know that, you know, if I'm around certain things or certain people, you know, the devil is there, right? Like the human beings are very susceptible, right? Like they're very prone to, you know, they're very easily prone to things, right? And the devil is always there trying to mislead man, right? Like he's always there. So it's like me, I avoid certain environments, right? I avoid certain environments. You know, I know what my triggers are. I know, you know, what things what things I need to avoid. And so, you know, and that helps me, right? That helps me to keep going. You know, that helps me to, you know, abstain from certain sins, right? And yeah, you know, and one thing also, life is a journey, right? Life is a journey. And I want to end with this, right? Like if you're someone, right, that's sinning, you know, if you're someone that's, you know, falling, right? Never despair, man. Never give up, or like never give up, man. Never despair, because, you know, you could be sinning right now, you know, not out of arrogance, but you're sinning because your environment, you know, makes it easy to sin, right? So yeah, you know, and once you know, like I said, once you know, once you're equipped, right, with the knowledge, and you're equipped with, you know, yeah, the knowledge and the right things, right? Like you have, you know, where your, like I said, where your triggers come from, right? And you know what to avoid, you know, to, you know, to, you know, yeah, you know what to avoid, and these sort of things. Like that's what's gonna ultimately, right, help you, right, to give up these sins completely, right? And today you could be sinning, tomorrow, you know, you could be, you know, at a level where, you know, you look back and you're like, wow, like, you know, I'm surprised, like, you know, I gave up a lot of these sins, right? And so yeah, that's what I wanted to just say, you know, never give up, never give up, man. Never despair. As much as you fall down, right, as much as you keep falling, get up, man. Allah, he loves those that repent. He loves those that, you know, don't give up, right? Because the devil is always there. He wants you to give up, you know. He wants you to lose hope. He wants you to, you know, turn away from Allah, right? And he'll always keep you, like, he wants you to just give up, right? And so, you know, it's you can't give up, right? You can't give up. You gotta keep going. Get up, you know, get up, keep going, because there's hope out there, right? There's hope out there, and there's also solutions too, right? There's always solutions to changing things, right? Like, you know, right now you might not have, right? You might not have the knowledge, right? You might not know, like, I don't, like, you might not be aware of the things that are causing you problems, right? But once you know, it's like, you know, now it's like you can work your way to changing things, right? And yeah, I just wanted to, you know, say that. And I know this video is kind of it's kind of long, but, you know, I feel like there's people out there that could really benefit from this, because like I said, no one's immune to sins, right? No one's immune to making mistakes, right? But, you know, if we could help each other, right, like, that's, you know, that's what it's about, right? It's about, like, helping one another. It's about, you know, assisting one another, and being there for one another, right? And know that, you know, Allah, most importantly, Allah doesn't give up on you, right? You know, as much as sometimes we might give up on ourselves, right? Allah never gives up. You know, all it takes is you just repenting and going back to him. No matter how many times you can fall, you could keep falling, just keep going back to him, keep going back to him, keep going back to him, right? And through that, you'll even start to discover things about yourself, right? Like, you'll be like, oh man, you know, Allah will actually give you, you know, knowledge, and he'll give you the tools, right, to be able to give up these things, right? And so yeah, man, that's what it's about, man. That's what it's about. Yeah, I don't want to keep going on. Yeah, I know it's a long video, but yeah, I hope this video can benefit anyone out there, you know. I hope it can benefit, inshallah. And yeah, you know, and comment down below as well, like, if there's any tips that you might have for those, right, that I might have missed something, right? I mean, I tried to give a few tips that I can think of, but there might be other tips that someone else might have, right? And so just comment down below, and just you know, share it with those that might need it, right? There might be people that need it, you know, that might be struggling, you know, that's really struggling, yeah, and then that really might need it. So, you know, yeah, comment down below, and yeah, take care, guys.